Welcome back to She Can, where role models lead by example by telling their stories, their insights and lived experiences to support and guide others. And I'm so excited to be talking to Sarah Hiscox today. Sarah, welcome to She Can. I am so grateful to a
You?
really close friend, Katinka, who put us in touch. You're an artist, a mother, and a writer. And you
That's right.
wrote your memoir called The Beginning and the End of Everything, which is
Yes.
talking about your early years of motherhood and marriage when you were addicted to heroin. And you
Yeah.
lost your husband, you lost your children, your home, and you talk about your journey and how you found yourself again, how you dealt with the judgment from others, where you talk about coping mechanisms for self-esteem or low self-esteem and negative thought patterns. And it is set to restore our faith in love, which is such a beautiful thing to say and promise of your book, which I believe is coming out next year.
Yes.
Sarah, so thank you, first of all, for joining me, and thank you for talking about it, and thank you for telling us your lived experiences today. So, talk to us a little bit about your journey and how you feel you got to where you are today.
Well, I think it so many things like this, they probably started when I was younger, when I was a child. So I remember from a very early age being addicted to fantasy. It was always a feeling of never being enough. And I remember that from a small child. I mean, I think most of us have that to a certain extent,
Yeah.
but mine was quite extreme, I think. And I felt that I wouldn't be liked as I was. So I had to give you an impression of what you I thought you wanted.
Mm.
So when I was 8 or 9, I was going to school and telling my friends that my father was Bjorn Borg. So because I thought, if you thought he in the 70s was one of the most famous men alive. I mean, my daughter doesn't know who he is, but I'm sure you know who he is.
Definitely.
And so, so from that early on, I was creating a different persona for myself
Mm.
because I felt the one that I was wasn't enough. And that, as I grew up, escalated into uh, a food disorder. I was bulimic and anorexic in my teens, and then eventually led to heroin addiction through other drugs first. But it was always a way of me trying to escape myself. And the thing with heroin is it does exactly what it says on the tin. It all those feelings of low self-esteem, low self-worth just disappeared. So
Mm.
I thought, well, so it wasn't that I was chasing, that feeling of being out of it. It was the feeling. It just takes away the feeling of yourself. So I felt like everyone else. I thought I felt good enough, and that was the first time I'd ever felt like that. And so in a way, very naively, I thought this was the answer.
Mm.
Now the problem was that I was married and I had two small children at that point. And drug addiction, I mean, any kind of addiction does not go well with family life. And although at the beginning I thought I had control of it, very quickly I realized I didn't. And it had control of me. And it took me a long time to get sober from drugs, because every time I stopped, that overwhelming tidal wave of feeling terrible about myself was so overwhelming and incapacitating. I didn't think I could survive without it. And now that was coupled with the guilt of having children.
Yeah.
I went to quite a few different treatment centers, and every time I would get clean, those feelings would come up again. And I didn't know how to cope with them. I didn't have a sort of toolbox of how to cope with that feeling. So I would inevitably go back again,
Mm.
until my husband then had to divorce me, and he had custody of the children, which was very painful. And everyone around you judges you. You hear about fathers leaving the home a lot, and there does not seem to be nearly as much judgment on the father as the
Yeah.
mother. It's a lot more shocking to hear about a mother losing her children to drugs or drink or whatever it may be
Yeah.
than a father. And so that impacted everything else as well. That feeling of judgment and also self judgment was so huge,
Mm.
it just prevented me from getting clean again. I just did not see a way out. And I thought at one point in the sort of darkest days that I didn't have the courage to take my own life, but I thought the drugs would definitely kill me sooner rather than later. And that seemed to be the only out for me. I couldn't, I just couldn't see a way of living without drugs. It was too painful. And I'd created such a terrible mess of my life. I convinced myself that children would be better off without me. Um, so I didn't think there was any type of salvation for me. I really didn't. But I did keep trying. I did every morning think today is the day I'm going to try and stop. And then I'd get to a point, and then I think I just can't do it. And then for some reason, and I didn't have some huge epiphany. I wasn't, I wasn't brought to my knees. Things had got really bad. And I think just it was a process. It was a long process of chipping away at the addiction or whatever it was. And I wasn't in treatment. I was going to NA meetings.
Mm.
I didn't feel that they were doing anything. But eventually I stopped. And like I said, it wasn't a huge epiphany. It was just a long process of over the years chipping away. And when I stopped, I think I had support from people in meetings, and they have this idea of just living for today. So it's just for today. The idea of a future without drink or drugs was quite terrifying because I didn't think I could live with myself.
Mm.
But if you could just do it for a day, it seemed manageable.
Yeah.
One day turned into 3 days, turned into a month. Now I'm 23 years clean and sober. But what happens when you get clean is you are faced with the carnage of your past.
Yeah.
You can't numb yourself anymore. So I think there's a certain amount of courage it takes to face it. I did, they do in NA meetings give you, like I said, a toolbox of how to navigate your life without numbing yourself on pills or whatever it may be. And so I just hurled myself into that. The guilt was really hard to get over. And it's something, again, I think that comes with time. You just sort of learn to live with it. After a few months, my decree absolute came through, which was very painful. And at this point, I was allowed to see the children every weekend.
Mm.
No, I was allowed to see them. I could go round to my old family home, which my husband was still living in, and say goodnight to the children every night. So I go round, read them a bedtime story, then go back to my flat, or I go to a meeting.
Mm.
I tried to fill my days with meetings or meeting other people that were clean, that were supportive, and just keeping it in the day. After about 6 months, when this decree absolute came through, my ex-husband said to me, do you want to go out for dinner to sort of celebrate the end of our marriage, which I found bizarre and quite depressing to be frank. But I still was very much in love with him, and I felt this. I think he was with me. The fact was that usually when you come to the end of a marriage, it's because either you fall out of love with someone, or there's an affair, or there wasn't that. There was this horrible, terrible thing. But I went out for dinner with him and he said to me, "Do you want to try again?" So I said, "Yes, most definitely." And it was very difficult at the beginning because there was so much resentment, I think, on both sides. There's so much water under the bridge, but we really worked at it. And I do believe, I mean, you know, people have different situations, but in my situation, that if you wanted something enough and you were prepared to put in the work, you could get it. And that's what happened. And then within a year, I'd moved back into the family home. The following year, I got pregnant and I had my daughter. And she was, I mean, she really was a gift for me, because all the stuff that I couldn't do or didn't do with my boys, going to the cake sale, taking them to swimming lessons, I could do with her. And that really helped to heal a lot. But I always thought, up until quite recently, I always thought that feeling of not being good enough is the core of who I am.
Mm.
And that will never change. I have ways of dealing with it and living alongside it so it doesn't destroy me.
Yeah.
But I really believe it was the core of who I am. And then a couple of years ago, I was talking to a friend of mine who was a therapist, and she was asking me about addiction. And I said, I really believe that all addicts have this profound feeling of their core of their being not feeling good enough, not as good as everyone else, not pretty enough, not funny enough, not clever enough, not successful enough, whatever it is. I had all of those.
Mm.
And she said to me, "Well, who told you that?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She said, "Well, who told you you weren't good enough?" And she said, "Well, what if that's not true? Why is that true?" And it honestly was like a light bulb. And I thought, you're right. I'm sick of this belief system that I've created myself from absolute, there's no evidence there, you know, to believe that. And I think that that was quite an important step for me. Whatever, so many people have this narrative in their head that they tell themselves, and it's just not true.
Yeah.
But they believed it for so long, it's become so much part of them, it seems impossible to change. But you can change it. You absolutely can change it. And I got to it quite late. And there was, you know, and I don't believe that you have to go through what I went through. You don't have to lose your husband or your children or your home or any of those things to change. It's never too late to change. And if you really want to do it, then you can do it.
Sarah, I am so impressed with, how you got to where you are today. And I think I'm wondering, what did it mean for you to write this memoir? Was that something that was cathartic still, so many years later? Tell us a little bit about that process and what it means for you and what it means for you to tell your story now so publicly.
Well, I've I always wanted to do it, but there was always that little voice. You're not good enough. You're not a
Mm.
writer. I'm not a writer. You know, I don't have a background in journalism or writing. So I just told myself, believe that narrative of you're not going to be able to do it. I thought, no, I'm gonna try. You know, you've got to love a try. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. I'll try it.
Yeah.
I went and did a writing course in the evening, one evening a week for about 4 months. It was really helpful. And slowly this story came together, and I found it hugely cathartic because I don't really like thinking about the past because it's painful.
Mm,
And I'm in a different place now. But there were definitely some unresolved, there was unresolved stuff there. And writing it has liberated me definitely from that stuff. And also, it's given me a chance to step back and look at my life and think, oh my God,
mm,
that was pretty impressive that I managed to get clean and carry on the journey the way I have.
yeah.
It gave me a chance to have some perspective on it, I suppose.
Mm,
And I wanted to do it for myself, but I also wanted to do it because I come across so many women in my life that may not be heroin addicts, but they rely on pills or drink or that so many women, there is something that they are relying on because they feel an emptiness
yeah,
within them and they're trying to fill it. And especially as you get older and you're a mother, it's much more difficult to deal with that stuff because you're scared of the judgment and of yourself. It's a scary thing to do.
yeah,
But I wanted to I wanted to show other women that especially with things like bulimia, I don't think I know a woman that doesn't have some kind of issue with her body
mm,
and has a food disorder, whether they dress it up. I'm sure there are some people who are allergic to wheat or allergic to dairy, but there are a lot of women that aren't, that say that because it's a way of controlling their food intake. And I wanted to shine a light on bulimia because there is nothing glamorous. Not this is anything glamorous about anorexia, but there is more of a control there.
yeah,
You can control the amount you eat. With bulimia, it's a lack of control, which is shaming. There's a lot of shame around it. And I really wanted to both being a heroin addict when you're a mother, being a bulimic when you're a mother, there is a lot of shame around that. And I wanted to shine a light on it because I think the shame is so incapacitating for women, for people. Um, so it was important that we can talk about it because, like I said, with men, it seems there seems less judgment around men with children than there are with women. It's a lot more shocking
yeah.
for a woman to lose her children than a man, I think.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Mm.
It's because we live in a patriarchal system, and the system is that, and also that we are judged, right? We're constantly judged on everything we do and what we look like. And I think
Yeah,
those conversations are so important and actually healing for ourselves because all the stories that we keep inside, they're going to kick our ass sooner or later because of the shame
exactly.
and the guilt and the grief and all of those emotions that one catapults to the other, and it's sort of a domino
Absolutely.
effect.
And then, ultimately, don't we deserve to be free of that?
Yeah,
I don't want to live the rest of my life permanently with this narrative telling me, that my body's not good enough or I'm not clever enough or I I life is so, I mean, it's a naive thing to say, but life is so short. I don't want to spend my life doing that to myself. We deserve to be free of that, I think. And I'm hoping that shining a light on those issues will bring them out into the light, and then the shame dissipates.
yeah.
I hope
It
anyway. I
does.
think.
Well, I think we need to replace this shame with storytelling, and
Yeah,
whether that is a psychologist I speak to, or a woman who sort of has a story of from pain to purpose, where she uses her story to bring about change, which is what you're doing. That seems to sort of be the essence of it. And so I'm so grateful you're telling your story, Sarah. And I'm wondering, do you have any habits that are sacred to you? Those sacred habits that keep you healthy and that keep you in your life and that keep you clean and, really enjoying yourself and your body and your place in this world.
Yeah, routine is really important to me. So I get up in the morning early-ish, 6:30 or 7. Um, I know that if I sleep later, just that it's the little things. It's not some huge thing that I take on every day that I have to live by. I find for me, it's the little things that make me feel good about myself.
Mm,
Exercising. I have two dogs. I walk them in the park every morning. Eating healthily. I think being honest with oneself. They have there's a saying in recovery of keeping your side of the street clean,
yeah.
and that is really important to me, and that really helps me in my life. I know that if I'm doing the right thing, I'm going to feel okay. It doesn't matter what's going on out there. If I do the right thing, I it's really funny when I was using, if I went to the supermarket, you get your shopping trolley
Yeah.
and you take your bags out of the shopping trolley, put them in the car, and you're meant to put the trolley back in the trolley park. I
Yeah.
would never do that. I would leave it because my feeling was that the rules don't apply to me. I can
Mm,
do what I want. I leave it in the middle of the car park. Now it sounds so pathetic, but I still, after 23 years, get such a kick out of putting the trolley back in the trolley park. It makes me feel like a responsible, civilized human being, and I'm
yeah.
part of society. I had this sort of immature idea of, to not follow the rules is really rebellious and I'm not like everybody else. But actually, I don't want to be unlike everybody else. I want to be part of society. And putting the trolley back is a real emblem to me of that. It's a real emblem of keeping my side of the street clean,
I
doing
love
the
it.
right thing,
Yeah.
not dropping litter on the floor, or whatever it is. Those little things really, and like I said, still now putting the trolley back gives me a kick every time. I'm like, look, i'm a I'm a responsible member of society. I'm putting the trolley back. It's those little things that make a difference that I hold on to. I would love to be able to tell you that I meditate every morning. I don't. I'd love to be able to do that, but I've tried to do meditation courses, and I just don't do it. But getting up early, going to the gym or going to the park and walking the dogs, and that's my sort of meditation. And I heard someone talking once that said meditation doesn't have to be sitting cross-legged on the floor
No.
with your eyes closed trying to clear your mind for half an hour.
Yeah.
Meditation is the spaces in between, the space in between you and me talking.
Mm,
That that space, that's meditation. And that was hugely powerful for me, because I thought I can do that. I can listen to the spaces in between when I remember. But that sort of thing is much more useful to me. Um, so yeah, I think those little things are the things that really keep me sane. And yeah, and I think it's really difficult because there is so much talk on social media and on the news about, women retaining their power, regaining their power. Yet at the same time, I get bombarded on Instagram about stuff for my skin. Oh, if you're over
mm,
50 and your skin has lost its collagen, you need to be taking this. Or, I mean, it's so difficult for a woman. So there is this one side of women regaining their power and being the chairman of companies, and yet at the same time, you've got to look 30 when you're 60. You know, somebody like Kris Jenner with that crazy facelift she's just had, where she literally looks like one of her daughters.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous. It's this absolute unrealistic pinnacle that we're meant to climb of how you're meant to look or
Yeah.
behave. And I really, really try not to buy into that stuff because I know that that will create, for me anyway, listen, do whatever you want, knock yourself out, have as many faces as you want, that's fine. But for me, I know that that stuff is damaging because I'm buying into that narrative of I'm not good enough again. And there's no end to that.
Yeah.
I know I will just be on this awful hamster wheel.
Yeah.
And like I said, I don't judge women. They can do whatever they want. But for me, that stuff is not healthy. It's toxic. And I know not to do that. It's hard, right? Because we all want to look good and we all, of course we do. But I know if I start on that journey, it'll end in tears for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. And Sarah, it's not just your story that, because all our stories are personal, but they're also collective. And I'm like you, I often think, oh, let people do whatever they want. But then I am challenged with the role models that we see in the world who do just about anything. They spend enormous amounts of money to stay young. And then I always think, whoever said that we need to look 30 when we're 60? Can we please look 60? Because we have been 30 and it was either great or not great. But now we have achieved to actually be 60.
Absolutely.
Can we celebrate that? Can we celebrate looking in the mirror and not having a super, you know, incredible everything
Right
incredible, you
face.
know,
Yeah.
where it used to be? Well, it's not gonna. Can I be proud of that? And
Can
I
I be
feel
proud
that
of
we
that?
live
Yeah.
in this, we live in a world where we have these beauty ideals, and these, they breathe down our that
I know.
keep us so locked in, you know, where we constantly have to feel less than and not good enough. And we have a mental health epidemic in the world, and we all need to do what feels right for us. But we can also not underestimate the incredible power we have by leading by example and showing that there are other ways, Sarah,
I
which is what
agree.
you're doing by doing what you do and by writing your book and by coming out and talking about it.
I mean, I went to the theatre last week, and when I came out of the theatre, there was a woman there, and she must have been in her 70s, and she was very elegant, but she had lines that she looked like a 70-year-old
Mm.
woman. You could see every line on her face. There was something so beautiful and dignified and elegant about her. And I thought, that's what I want to be when I'm 70. That's how I want to look. It was so, and it's so uncommon now.
It's uncommon.
I
Yeah, it
mean,
really is. Yeah.
you to notice a woman in her 70s not having had anything done, it's, yeah, it's uncommon. But there was something so, yeah, dignified. She was growing old with dignity.
Yeah.
And listen, like I've just spent half an hour talking about being judged, and I really don't judge other people. You can do what you want. It is just for me, I have to be so vigilant about that stuff because I know that that voice is in there,
Yeah.
and I just have to be really careful to make sure the volume is turned down all the time. And
Yeah.
if I start doing things like that, then the volume gets turned up and I start listening to it, and that's so damaging for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a really personal thing.
Yeah, and I feel the same, but there are two sides of that coin. And so I
Mm,
think the power we have is to turn up the stories that give us, that fill us up, and to turn down the ones that don't fill us up. And everyone
mm.
has to decide what that is, for them. So give us some tips, Sarah, on, there is a, most girls that I know, and I've got three children, they struggle with low self-esteem one way or another, or negative thought patterns, what tips can you give to our younger generation that, are on the at the beginning of their journeys? How can one deal with those a little bit more
Well, for
constructively?
me, I have three children as well, and my eldest is 30, who he's a boy, and then I have a 19-year-old daughter, so she's right in that. And I think the best thing you can do is share your experience with them.
Yeah.
I have quite a few friends who want their children to believe they're this sort of perfect role model,
Mm,
and that's just not life. So I've always been really honest with all my children about myself and my journey. And I think communication is key. It's very difficult for them to avoid that self-esteem issue, especially, as I said, with social media bombarding them with the young girls with perfect bodies. But I think if you can keep communication open, it's pointless stopping them. You can't stop the tide of social media. um, but I think communication is everything. And I've always tried with my daughter and my other two children to be honest and to keep talking. And so far, touch wood, so good.
yeah.
Um, but I think really it's honesty and communication. Those are the two main things.
Yeah.
Because now I notice that my daughter will tell me about how she's feeling. I would never have shared
Mm,
my thoughts about myself with my parents. They had no idea. Well, we just didn't speak. We didn't have an emotional language. And we do. We're much better at that now with our children, talking on an emotional level. Being honest, I think, really
yeah.
is key.
Yeah. Sarah, so what do you feel really matters to you now, and how do you want to matter?
That's a good question. What matters to me now? Well, my family, obviously, my children and my husband matter because I know what it felt like when they were taken away, and I don't take them for granted now. Um, I think having, I think really what matters to me is keeping myself well and healthy.
Mm,
And I mean that mentally as well as physically. Um, just being, I mean, it sounds so trite, but being grateful. I mean, I know
yeah.
people bandy that word around a lot, so much so that it's probably lost a lot of its meaning. But a lot of good came out of what happened, what I went through. And one of the main things is the gratitude I have. Again, it's very easy to think, oh, but I want a bigger house, or I want another holiday, or I want, that pair of shoes, or and I do get that. I mean, of course, I'm human. I want shoes. I want bigger houses. I want nice holidays. But ultimately, those things don't really matter. What really matters is a sense of self, a sense of me knowing who I am and
Yeah.
what I want and what I don't want. Before, I'd be very, if you said it was black, I'd say it was black. I
Mm,
would just go with what everybody else said. So that sense of self, of who I am, and I'm still definitely on a journey with that. I am by no means 100% sure of who I am, but I know which way to go and I know how to get there. Whereas before, I really didn't. I was completely lost. Now I sort of have a roadmap in my head. I know the destination, and it'll probably take me the rest of my life to get there, but it is a process of learning.
yeah.
So I suppose those are the things that matter. I mean, I'm sure, Most people would say that. But it is kind of not forgetting where I came from, being grateful for what I've got, appreciating it, and not doing the grass is greener on the other side,
Yeah.
which I still do, but I try and pull myself back from it. It's hard, right?
Yeah,
In
it's
such a
really hard.
consumerist society, yeah.
Absolutely. Sarah, so the beginning and the end of everything. When is it
Mm.
coming out, and who do you think this book is for?
Well, it's for anyone. It's for anyone that struggles with self-esteem, but it's also anyone that likes a love story. It was funny because when I first wrote it, I wrote it and I thought it's a story of salvation and addiction, and when I first met my wonderful agent, I said that to her, and she said, "Oh," she said, "I see it as a love story. It's a love
Mm,
story." And I thought that was so beautiful because ultimately that's exactly what it is. It's a wonderful story. It's love conquering all, but also a story of somebody that really struggled with their self-esteem. It's not really that much more complicated than that.
yeah.
Somebody that really struggled with that. So that's who I want to talk to. And
Yeah,
I think maybe not most people, I don't know. A lot of people struggle with that.
definitely. Sarah, so what would you like our listeners to take away from your story?
That it's never too late to change. That narrative that maybe you've been telling yourself is not true. Just because it's in your head, just because you believe it, doesn't make it true. And you can change that anytime you want. And it's not such an impossible mountain to climb. It's available for anyone. It's just a matter of being determined and wanting it, I think.
Sarah, I'm so happy to have you on Chica, and thank you so much for
Well,
taking the
thank you
time,
so much for asking me.
Sarah. And we will obviously promote the book when it's out, and everyone look out for the beginning and the end of everything, a beautiful love story.
Yeah, it's going to be out May next year and on Audible too, so you can listen to it. You don't have to read it if you don't want.